Welcome to another episode of Trouble to Transformation. Today's guest, I have Alyssa Stefanson. Alyssa is a somatic practitioner, holistic recovery mentor, and host of the Body Wisdom Rising podcast. She helps people heal trauma, addiction, and unhealthy relationship patterns by returning to the wisdom of the body. With lived experience in recovery and years of guiding others, Alyssa offers an embodied path that weaves nervous system regulation, relational healing, and earth-based ritual. Through her work with Body Wisdom Rising, she supports clients in breaking free from cycles of escape and unhealthy relational dynamics, guiding them toward connection that feels safe, nourishing, and real. Her approach isn't about fixing or controlling, but about helping people remember their body's innate intelligence, rewrite old imprints, and reclaim the wholeness that was always theirs. Welcome, Alyssa. Thank you for coming on the show today. I am super stoked to have this conversation. Just for our viewers, Alyssa Stefanson is the host of Body Wisdom Rising and Wild Feminine Rise. So
Thank you
welcome,
so
Alyssa.
much for having me. Been following you as well. There's been obviously a lot of similarities on our path. We have a lot of similar connections, which is really cool. So, yeah, it's really great to be here.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and I've been watching a lot of your content in the last, I'd say it's probably about 6 months or so, and oh, wow, it is profound content. So if the viewers haven't started following yet, I hope they head on over there because Alyssa is a holistic recovery mentor, somatic practitioner, that has a lot of trauma-informed care, and some of that is nervous system regulation, which really speaks volumes for me. I know that in my own work in men's recovery, that's probably one of the very first things that I introduce is nervous system regulation. So, do you want to just kind of give us a background on the catalyst for your
Yeah,
platforms?
yeah. And first of all, I absolutely love that you incorporate a lot of nervous system regulation practices. It is the absolute foundation to
Yes.
healing. It's the place where we actually really truly need to start. Um, yeah, and so
Yes.
my platform, so Wild Feminine Rise is my name on Instagram, and actually where that came about
Mm.
was through reconnecting to my own inner wisdom, my own primal instincts through somatic. So reconnecting back to that animal body. And there's a book that I really, really love as well. The Incredible. And a lot of just these practices that I incorporate are very much getting out of our head and reconnecting back to our body, connecting back to earth, because
Mhm.
I believe that's needed more than ever. We've been very disconnected as a culture, as a society, from our
Mhm.
bodies and from nature. So that's really what that stands for.
Yes, I love it. Now, you don't come up with these types of flat platforms without a backstory. Are you willing to share a little bit about the
Yeah,
backstory?
absolutely. So, I,
Uh-huh.
just like yourself, come from the world of recovery. I struggled with substances for
Mm.
much of my life, starting at the age of 14 years old. So, I had, and many people say this, I had a good upbringing. I had great parents. Of course, they had their own like traumas from childhood and their own struggles. No one's perfect.
Yes.
No one goes through childhood untraumatized, not any single one of us, right? No one's exempt from that.
Mm.
And I was always a very sensitive child. I experienced extreme social anxiety. My nickname was actually Mouse growing up because I never talked which is
Oh.
so wild to have a platform where I speak so much. But I never talked in elementary or middle school. And so that was my nickname. And starting in
Mhm.
high school, yeah, I just got involved in with a group of friends that used and experimented with a lot of drugs. And it was like as soon as I started, it went from 0 to 60. Like there was no moderation my very
Oh.
first drink, very first time I started using, and things escalated pretty quickly. So I experienced a lot of
Wow.
significant trauma in my teen years. And I won't go into too much detail
Mm-hmm.
about that, but it definitely catalyzed my addiction for sure. And, I was in a relationship with my drug dealer at that time. So that was a very
Ah.
wild time, very chaotic. And I lost a lot of people in my friend group
Mhm.
during that period to homicide, suicide, drug overdoses, and also car
Wow.
accidents. And I would say that I hit my first rock
Mm-hmm.
bottom after my best friend passed away. She actually died in a car accident. I actually ended up writing her eulogy at 20 years old. And a month later, I became pregnant with my daughter. And I was about to be a single mother. And so that was a wake up call for me for sure. So, of course, being pregnant, luckily, I was able
Mm.
to separate myself from that whole friend group, got rid of my cell phone, and I remained sober my whole pregnancy. And, I really wanted to be sober and get on a right path. I did not start any recovery program. I did not do any inner work or any healing. I followed a spiritual practice for
Mhm.
sure. Like that opened up an entire world of spirituality for me, I would say. But again, I just didn't have a community. I didn't have a
Mhm.
program in place whatsoever. And so I did remain sober for a while, but I had a habit of getting into relationships with the same partners, the same patterns. And so I would do well on my
Um,
own, but I was a very codependent user and drinker. So I always ended up getting back into the
mhm.
same types of really toxic cycles. So really chaotic, a lot of drinking, a lot
Yes.
of drugs, and then they often turn quite violent. So my relationship in high school, it was a
Oh.
very violent relationship, experienced a lot of violence. And I
Mhm.
did throughout my 20s, there was a couple relationships that weren't that dramatic or that chaotic, but they still definitely weren't healthy. And it was at the age of 27 that I actually entered into a relationship with a war veteran. And he struggled with a lot of, his own dysregulation, his own demons, his own trauma, PTSD. He did 2 tours in Afghanistan. And yeah, he didn't heal from that. And we ended up starting to drink and use a
Mm.
lot together. And at first, it was like a dream come true when I entered into that relationship. Like, I had never been treated so well in my life. I really believed that I was going to marry this man. And things moved very quickly. And I moved in with him really fast. And, within 6 months, it started to become very violent. And even just living in that environment, it was like always walking on eggshells. You never knew, who you were
Mm.
gonna get or what was gonna happen every single day, and, it got very, very violent, and I was very badly, hurt multiple times in that relationship. And so my,
Mm.
substance problem ended up escalating, and I ended up started to drink every single day. I had to have alcohol in my system 24/7. And I wanna first
Mm.
say that I never thought that I would struggle with alcohol like that. I struggled with drugs. So cocaine was my drug of choice in high school, and I would, like, drink and
Yes.
I would, like, black out, but it wasn't anything that I ever, like, craved or cared for. Like, alcohol was never a thing for me, it just led me to other drugs. So I never thought that I would.
Of course. It was like a
Totally,
gateway.
totally, and I never really
Yeah.
liked drinking. So I never could see
Mhm.
myself, becoming addicted to alcohol. But it escalated really quickly to the point where I needed alcohol in my system 24/7. Like, the withdrawal symptoms were so unbearable, the shaking was so unbearable. I would actually be outside,
Mm.
the liquor store as soon as they opened every single day at 10 AM. I would actually even start sneaking out of work to go to the liquor store if I didn't have it. I always had to have it on me. And, I just remember, like, buying alcohol, getting into my car, and if there was no one around, I would chug it out of the brown paper bag, or I would go into the Safeway next door and go to the
Yeah.
bathroom and chug it because I couldn't handle the shaking and the withdrawal that I was going through. I just needed it in
Oh.
my system. So it was very scary to be a very scary place to be in. And, of course, just everything in my life just started to really, really, go downhill. And eventually, I gained the courage to leave that relationship because the, abuse did escalate, and so I knew that I needed to get out. I was like,
Yes.
"It's either I'm gonna die here or I gotta leave." Like, I gotta leave and I gotta get sober because I am not gonna get sober in this relationship, and I knew it was just at that
Mhm.
point. Like, there was no way that I would still be alive today if I stayed in that relationship. So, luckily, I did leave, and I ended up moving into an empty apartment. I had no belongings. I moved into an empty
Mhm.
apartment. And within only it was about 2 weeks, 2, 3 weeks later, I ended up losing my job. And so that was so devastating
Mm.
to obviously be in a place where it takes a lot of courage to leave a relationship like that. So much
It
courage, and so
does.
much of the fear
Yes.
is, like, I'm not gonna make it on my own because I became so financially dependent on him. I was so dependent in so
Yes.
many ways, and it was like, "I'm not gonna be able to do this," but I was like, "No, Alyssa, like, you got a decent job, you got an apartment, you just gotta go." And so I did take that leap, and then to lose my job, it was very devastating, and trying to recover, and I was dealing with a lot of trauma because,
Yes.
in that relationship, I was assaulted with, weapons. There was weapons involved, being held in the fetal position with a
Wow.
gun for over 8 hours. It was very traumatizing. And so, yeah, that would
Wow.
be that was definitely a very, very rock bottom. And I wish I could say that I stayed sober at that
Mhm.
point. I did not. I went through
Mhm.
one more,
Mm.
relapse, which lasted about a few months, and, there was a period where I just went missing for 7 days and ended up waking up in the backseat of my car. This was the day before my 31st birthday, so I had been drinking that whole day, alcohol all in the backseat of my car, -40 out. Luckily, I left my vehicle running all night because I couldn't get out. I just stayed in the back seat. I was not in a safe area. And I just stayed there all night, unable to
Mhm.
move, and I'm like, "I'm gonna die." And I don't know how, like,
Yeah.
12 hours later, I ended up driving home, still couldn't get out of my vehicle into my apartment, and I called my brother, and I was like, "I'm gonna kill myself." Like, it was so severe, the withdrawal was so severe, the voices were so intense in my head, could not see any way out. I was like, "I have no choice but to kill
Mm.
myself because I can't get sober." And so, my brother, he convinced
Wow.
me to just get inside, like, try to make my way in. And I just remember my legs shaking, like,
Mhm.
uncontrollably. I was like, "How am I even gonna make it into the apartment?" And I did, and
Wow.
I lied on my bed, and those voices were just so intense, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna have to jump out my apartment window." And so I was scared, and I called my dad,
Wow.
and I'm like, "I'm gonna jump out my apartment window, like, I'm terrified." And my dad's crying on the phone, and he's praying, and so he started to make
Mm.
his way
Yeah.
over, and I got up from my bed and I walked back and forth to the window, just really trying. One part of me was like, "Yeah, just do it.
Mhm.
Just jump out. Like, there's no way out." And then this other part of me is like, "Just stay put. Just wait. Just hold on. Just wait." And eventually I surrendered to that
Yeah.
voice that was telling me just lie down and wait. And all of a sudden, and I know this doesn't happen in many cases, but all of a sudden I just felt this overwhelming sense of peace. It was like a white light experience. And those voices
Wow.
completely stopped and went away. And in that moment, I knew that I was done and I was
Wow.
never gonna take alcohol or drink alcohol again, and I didn't. And from that point forward, I started a recovery program, so I started going to a 12-step program,
Mm.
and yeah, I never touched alcohol. And, I know
Mm.
it's not a case that we hear often, so it's hard to kinda share with people that
Mhm.
that was how I got sober, was, like, having a spiritual awakening, and it
Yeah.
was the beginning of a very intense
Yeah.
spiritual awakening. When I say that, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a whole hell of a lot of work to do on the other side of that. In recovery, there
Mm.
was a lot of
Mhm.
work, but that
Yeah.
desire and that craving to drink alcohol or use drugs again was completely gone. It vanished. Yeah.
Wow. That's like a divine intervention. And I mean, and that is the opposite of addiction is connection.
Mhm.
So, thank God that you were saved in that moment because a lot of people with the alcohol, they need like
Yeah.
clinical detox. Was there any professional sources for you
No,
at that moment? It was strictly
none.
divine
And it's so
intervention.
wild to look back on because I was like, "Whoa,
Wow.
like, that was pretty severe." Like, the withdrawal I was going through, I should have been.
Yeah.
Um, I should have gone through a medical detox, but I didn't. And still, like, a couple days after, the
Yeah.
withdrawal was pretty bad. Like, I wasn't able to even get up from, like, the couch for I lied on the couch for a couple of days. But, yeah, I
Mhm.
started the recovery program, and slowly but surely, things started to get better, but I was having really profound spiritual experiences after that. Like, that was the beginning of a complete complete awakening that was very, very intense. And, I kinda wanna mention too, because I think this is important to talk about, and I do see this a lot in this space just with people that I work with, is for me,
Yeah.
because I had a spiritual awakening and I had experienced so much trauma, because trauma is actually a catalyst for awakening, can often be. Peter Levine,
Mhm.
who's the founder of
Yes.
somatic experiencing, he often talks about that. So what happened when I went through my spiritual awakening was that I was very dissociated. Like, I was very disconnected from my body. I was floating. Honestly, it was great.
Yeah.
Like, I felt really good that first year because I was like, floating on a cloud.
Mhm.
But I was, like, very disconnected from reality and very disconnected from my body and, like, doing the actual real work that it actually takes to heal, which is coming back into your body, like, processing your trauma, processing your
Mhm.
emotions, but obviously my body I didn't feel safe to do so, so I ejected from it. I left my body. And that was actually the
Yes.
beginning for
Yeah.
me, when I actually realized that I wasn't in my body, like, I hadn't landed. When I started to
Mhm.
actually realize that was when I was around other people, because I started to learn about somatic work, and I was like, "Oh, I leave my body when I'm with people. Like, I'm actually not connected to them, and I actually have a
Ah.
fear of
Yeah.
intimacy and connection. I'm never actually grounded and present with my sensations and my
Ah,
emotions."
yes.
So that was the beginning for me of somatic work, and somatic work has been so pivotal for my recovery journey. So such an important piece for sure.
Oh, it is such an important piece, and that's kinda what I work with the guys at the recovery center as well, because especially for men, they always wanna try to
Mm,
outthink everything. They wanna try to solve and, analyze and be very critical and stuff, and I always get them into their body as well, but they're not familiar with that. They don't understand what that actually feels like, and when you say that you were disassociated from your body, can you kinda give a bit of a description maybe how that felt? Like, how can we kind of experience that
totally. For
eyes?
me, it showed up as a lot of spiritual bypassing. So for me, it showed up as a
Ah,
lot of
yes.
like, I don't want to call it toxic positivity, but like everything felt really good during that
Mhm.
time. Like it was,
You could definitely call it toxic
yeah,
positivity.
like really
I get
focusing
it.
on that love and light.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm not triggered by anything. Like I have
Mm.
surpassed all of that. It was almost like a spiritual ego took over, is the way that I explain it.
Ah, interesting.
On ego death,
Yeah.
we're always susceptible to that spiritual ego taking over, and I definitely went through, an ego death for sure. Though we can go through many. Ego deflation, maybe we could call it, but that
Yeah.
spiritual ego took over. And yeah, I would say that it showed up for me as honestly, almost feeling like I was above a lot of, like, the program that I was working. Like, I had already healed, I was already above
Okay.
that, everything was all love and light and very
Mhm.
positive. And, not feeling fully present in my body, just a very simple practice you can do, and this is how I actually figured it out, was, just even feeling, like, the base of your spine as you're sitting, your feet on your floor. Like, can you feel
Yes.
that? Your thighs, can you notice any of the sensations in your body?
Yeah.
And that being said, for some people, it is very overwhelming. So if we have experienced a lot of trauma in our lives, especially when our body boundaries have been crossed, it only makes sense to leave our body because our
Mhm.
body wasn't safe to occupy. So I had to have compassion for myself when I did
Yes.
realize how much I was bypassing and how much I wasn't actually present and grounded. I had to have
Mhm.
compassion for myself because I was like, "Oh, that's such a intelligent, like, our body is so intelligent. Like, what an intelligent system when, we go through such traumatic experiences and especially ones that, like, physically harm us. Our body is so intelligent that we eject from it.
Mhm.
So it's like, I love you so much that you're not gonna have to feel the perpetual pain of this. And so we're gonna leave."
Ah, I
Yeah,
love
and
that.
so realizing, okay, I'm
Yeah.
not fully grounded in my body, it's gonna be a process, and for some people, like, when I introduce
Mhm.
these somatic practices, I always want people to know, like, if it feels overwhelming, don't judge yourself. You might need to work with someone, and it might be a better place to start would be orienting to your environment. So nature is a great place to heal,
Yes.
like a place where we feel really
Yes.
safe. Even just like really taking in your environment and looking around and taking in like the textures and
Mhm.
like the smells and feeling like the grass, beneath you if it doesn't feel safe to close your eyes and go inward. Cause for some it doesn't. It doesn't. And, that's why I say that the somatics and the nervous regulation piece really is where we need to start before we start advancing into like other practices. Because if we don't have that, like even talking about plant medicines, for some people they're totally ready to
Mhm.
engage in that, a lot earlier on. For me, I wasn't because it would have been
Mhm.
way more
Yeah.
disorienting and dissociating if I had started there when I wasn't even in my body to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's always a good place to start is to start to, yeah, come back in, ground yourself, start to, build a relationship with your inner landscape and start to learn body vocabulary. And this can
Mm.
be really
Yeah.
challenging for so many people, like describing what they feel or describing their sensations.
I love that.
And I always
Yes.
say, like,
Yeah.
don't worry, because some people are like, it's almost like they feel stupid because they can't name their sensations. I'm like, no, it's like speaking a
Hmm.
foreign language. When we're that disconnected, yeah,
It's
we're
so
we're gonna
true.
have a difficult time
Yeah.
explaining it. And I always provide them with, different words that they can use to help them. But yeah, it is just even noticing, like, am
Yes.
I am I noticing, and a good place to start is, am I clenching my jaw? Because so many of us hold so much tension in our upper body, and there should
Yes.
always
Yeah.
be a little bit of space between our teeth. And, if our body posture
Hmm.
shows a lot about, we have holding patterns in our body where we're holding on to stress, where we're holding on to trauma. Hips is safety. Hips is our root. So it's like if we don't feel safe, often there's a
Yes.
lot of tightness in our hip area. I'm still working through that. So, yeah, I mean, those are
Ah,
always really good
yeah.
places to really begin when we start to explore the world of somatics, is just approaching with curiosity. It's like, how am I holding my body and where am I holding tension in it? Because our body's always speaking to us.
Yes, yeah. I love that you actually give, your clients, like, descriptive words on the
Yeah.
physical sensations. I have a two-page document, like, not 1, but 2, and it could be as simple as, like, a twitch or an itch, but I love the tension because a lot of us are carrying tension in the jaw. The clenching, and that's one thing I always work with the guys at the recovery center is, does anger can you get angry from a thought alone? And they're like, "Well, of course." And I'm like, "Well, does that thought of anger have a physical sensation in the body?" And then they kinda pause, and they think about it. And then we start going through the physical sensations, and then I tell them after that, then that physical sensation in the body now sends a message to the brain so that we can make a personal narrative out of this thought that we just had. So I love that you're doing this work because that is, I would say, like the foundation, right? It's kind of like that cognitive behavioral neuroscience, but with that somatic piece. So
Totally. And like you
important.
just said, it's like it shows up
Yeah.
physiologically first. If someone were to come up behind you and grab you, you'd have a physiological response
Hmm.
first, then the emotion, and then it follows with
Yes.
a thought, like, I gotta get out of here, or what's happening, you know? And but so often it's like in our
Hmm.
culture, we're taught to deal with the thoughts first, but the thoughts are actually a byproduct of what's happening in
Yes.
our body. And so that's the root. And so it's like, so often
Exactly.
it's like, and so many of us I know can relate to this, and I still go back there, the ruminating thoughts. It's absolute torture, but it's actually a protective mechanism, thinking we can figure it out in our minds, when really it's like we just need to get out of the
Hmm.
head and into the body, and it's
Yeah.
easier said than done, and I fully understand that, and it can be hard to grasp it when we're so disconnected from our bodies, but it's a gradual practice.
Hmm.
Eventually, you will be able to get out of those thoughts and just be with the sensations. And so sometimes another helpful tool, if you do end up really getting stuck in your head and you have ruminating thoughts, for me, this is a helpful tool. Again, we all have different tools that are going to be supportive for us at different times. But if I really can't get out of the ruminating thoughts, so say something happened that triggered the F out of me. And
Hmm.
I can't get out of my mind, what I'll do is I will, like, just not verbal, or write down, just let it all pour out. Anything I want to say, don't hold
Yeah.
back, don't filter, write it all out on a piece of paper. And even sometimes it's a worst case scenario. So sometimes we have anxiety because we're worrying about something that hasn't even happened, a future reality that hasn't even happened.
Exactly.
Write down your worst case
Yeah.
scenarios. Get all of your worst case scenarios
Yeah.
out of your head onto the paper. And then often just that alone gives a sense of relief, enough relief so that we can go into the body and start to process what's going on there.
Now, with that being said, Alyssa, if you don't mind, if I can just
Please.
backtrack a little bit, like you went into recovery for alcohol and the drugs, but what about these lived experiences that you that had an energetic footprint or fingerprint in the body? I imagine you had a lot of ruminating thoughts. There had to have been some
Mhm.
PTSD as a result of some of your experiences. How is that showing up in your body now, moving forward
Oh
into your
gosh.
recovery?
Yeah, and I look back now, and of course I was so disconnected from it, even just speak the spiritual bypassing piece.
Hmm.
Like, I had really didn't have any friends at that time. and I isolated myself. I
Mhm.
completely cut myself off. I spent a lot of
Wow.
time, I think it was probably binge watching YouTube videos, honestly, and, like, listening.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Self-help
self-help, right?
stuff?
Healing on my own. I didn't need
Yeah.
anybody. I needed to heal on my own. I
Mhm.
could figure that out. And so I would, like, binge,
Yes.
YouTube videos. I would binge podcasts. I read a lot of books, and these practices were helpful, right? Like, I learned so much from them, but,
Mhm.
like, it wasn't the actual work that I actually needed. And I remember, like, getting to a point, I'm like, "Okay, I
Mhm.
think I do need help," because I had no therapy. Like, I didn't have any help during that time other than going to 12-step meetings. But, it's like, maybe I do need therapy, but I didn't have a job at that time. I had no money. And so I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, how can I," and I looked up some program, I forget what it was called, a clinic that, supported women, especially leaving domestic violence situations. So I did call the clinic, but it was a 4-month wait. I didn't even put my name on the list. I was like, "You know what? It's a sign someone else needs it more than I do. I don't need it." It's complete avoidance. So I
Yeah.
didn't get any help for a long period of time, and I did do it all on my own. I became super hyper independent. And so, while in a way, a lot of
Ah.
people looked at me and they're like, "Oh, you're so strong, like, you have it all together." But everything was so suppressed. It was such an
Mhm.
armor that I put on. And so I walked through the world, like,
Yeah.
people were really impressed, "Wow, like, you've done so much work." On the outside looking in, yeah, it did look that way. But in reality, I
Mhm.
couldn't connect to anyone, like, I couldn't open my heart. I was so shut down. And so I actually came across, who is now actually a mentor, and I actually work for them, a company called Somatic Release. But I came across a guy named Stephen Jaggers
Mhm.
who shared a breathwork practice, and he was speaking about somatics and some of Peter Levine's work, I believe it was. And it introduced me to that whole
Yeah.
world, and I was like, "Oh, wow, yeah, like, I have a lot of, like, trauma in my body, like, I'm very avoidant." That's how it was showing up for me. I
Mhm.
wasn't experiencing extreme anxiety. I was just very numb. I didn't feel anything. I was so shut off. And so
Mm.
I did start to do some simple practices at home. I started exploring Peter Levine's work, and it's
He's
so
amazing.
amazing. And so I did notice,
Amazing.
that was helpful to begin with, but I actually ended up going to my first breathwork ceremony, and it wasn't a somatic release one. It was just one held here in Winnipeg by a couple that were so incredible, like, so incredible, well trained. But the
Mhm.
reality is, I didn't educate myself on what can happen if you have a lot of trauma and you haven't done enough
Ooh.
practices going into an intense
Yes.
breathwork session, which is very important to mention.
Oh,
So I
yes.
had all of this suppressed trauma, and I knew, I'm like, I need help. Like, I need to do something. And interesting enough, like, I grew up in a family that was very much against the Western. I don't wanna say against, but, I never went to a therapist, Western medical
Mhm.
system. I've never taken any pharmaceuticals. It just wasn't raised that way, so it wasn't even an option. Like, I didn't even
Mhm.
think it to be an option. So I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go try this breathwork session." And so I went there, and it was 2 hours of, like, really deep belly breathing, which is very intense if you've never done breathwork before. And I actually
Mhm.
during, like, the session, I just remember losing control of my body. It was wild. It was like my body was just doing its own thing. It was releasing. And the couple who were
Mhm.
facilitating were so incredible, the way that they held space. She held me, like, I cried in her arms like a baby, and they were just so, so great.
Ah.
And I actually did feel like, I remember feeling my heart cracked open. I'm like, "My heart's opening," just from breath work. It was like a psychedelic experience. It was wild. And so I felt my heart crack open. And yeah, I went through this really intense release, and I felt bliss. I felt peace. I felt calm. I felt
Mhm.
incredible after the session was over. I was like, this is great. Like, it felt really healing. But what happens, and this is what happened
Mhm.
after, this is really important to mention. Luckily, I had already been exploring the world of somatics and educating myself on it. So I did understand what was happening.
Mhm.
When we're shut down, so say, and the best way to describe it, I like using this description, this analogy is looking at animals in the wild so you can really understand what was happening to me. So, when you look at animals in the wild,
Mhm.
if you had a herd of, say, an impala getting chased by a lion, what happens is they're running, they're taking off at a super high speed. So, they're
Mhm.
in fight or flight, and they have all that sympathetic energy running through their body, hypervigilance, like, I need to get out of here, I need to escape. If they feel like they can't escape, what ends up happening is the impala will actually drop to the ground and go into the immobility response. So this is the shutdown response. It's
Yes.
very smart. They do this so that they don't feel the perpetual pain of being ripped apart. So they actually dissociate and leave their
Exactly.
bodies. Very much what I did, right? I was dissociated and leave my body.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, so
Freeze,
I don't
gone.
feel that pain. And so what ends up happening is often the lioness will think that it's dead and she'll go get her cubs so that she can show them how to finish making the kill. And what happens is that impala gets up out of the immobility response and it will actually shake. So it shakes, it finishes the energy discharge cycle because all of that energy was trapped inside of its
Uh-huh.
body. And another important piece is it returns to the herd. So it returns to community. We humans have the same biological response. So that happens to us when we're experiencing
Yes.
trauma. I obviously was experiencing that on repeat in the relationship that I had been in for 4 years. So all of that energy was trapped inside of my body. I never discharged it. And so
Mm.
what
Yeah.
ended up happening was like during that breathwork session, it opened something in me. So it was like, like if you look at a slinky, it's like you want to slowly, when we're talking about like the nervous system, we don't want to completely unravel it all at once. It's like a slinky, like slowly unraveling
Mhm.
it. Otherwise, what happens when you pull it back all at
Uh-huh.
once is what happens is it shuts, it closes itself right away if we open it too fast, right? So that was what happened for me. So all of a sudden, it was like I just opened up everything at once. And I felt for the next few days after anxiety like I had never experienced it in my life. It was so intense. Yeah. And at
Interesting.
this time, I was working. So I was back at work at this time. And I actually ended up having to leave work because, I started getting really intrusive thoughts. It was very intense. I started actually having suicidal
Uh-huh.
thoughts, which I hadn't had in years. So it was like all this frozen part of me
Wow.
that had been suppressed had all of a sudden been unraveled, and it came up like fighting, like thinking that it was still, in threat. It was basically a frozen part that had been traumatized, frozen in my body that all of a sudden was released and thought that the threat was still there. And so it was so
Interesting.
intense for me. Luckily, I knew this. You know, for most people, they wouldn't know what was going on, but I was like, "Oh, I know exactly what's happening." So
Yeah.
then I started seeing a therapist who was trained in IFS and, also trained in somatics, and wow, did she help me. So she also understood what was happening,
Wow.
and she really helped me come back into my body, so I did many sessions with her. I'm so grateful that I chose to work with her, and yeah, that really helped bring me back, and I was able to work through that. So now how that shows up today is, yeah, I have a lot more sense of peace and presence in my body. And I'm in a place right
Mhm.
now where I can actually hold a lot more complexity and nuance than I did in the past. And this is a huge indicator of integration and when we're healing. So when we experience a lot of
Mhm.
trauma, we either
Yeah.
become chaotic or rigid, right? Like they actually see this as impaired
Mhm.
integrations in the brain. And so that's why often it's like, in my past with my substance use, I was very chaotic. And I ended up becoming very
Mhm.
rigid when I left that relationship, the pendulum swing. So I was very black and white
Yes.
in my thinking. And I was very like all or nothing, like good or bad. Like everyone is either all good or all bad. I didn't want anything to do with men. I didn't want men to come near me, to touch me. I was very rigid and closed off. And so what somatics has done, as well as some other practices as I started to open up into the world of psychedelic therapy, is it's allowed me to be able to be with those polarizing parts within me. It's
Yes.
allowed me to be able to really hold, nuance and complexity in the world, which I wasn't able to do. Like, I don't think in black and white anymore, right? Not saying that I don't lean maybe when it comes to different things, different issues. Of course, you're gonna lean a little bit
Yeah.
one way or the other, but I'm able to hold other perspectives.
Mhm.
I am not hijacked by my emotions. I do not experience anxiety.
Mhm.
I haven't. I don't know when the last time. I shouldn't say I
Mhm.
never do,
Good.
because I think at times we all can experience a little bit of anxiety, but not to the degree.
I think it's
Yeah, but
normal for
not to the
sure.
degree that I had in the past. Like, it doesn't consume my life or impact my life in a negative
Mhm.
way. I've been really able to,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
be with the sensations and the emotions, and I don't get completely hijacked by them for long periods of time, I should say, because I am human, and of course things do impact us,
Yes.
but I'm always able to come back to center, a lot quicker than I did in the past.
Yeah, no, that's excellent, Alyssa. And really, I thank you for sharing that part of yourself with the emotional release that you had in the breathwork session. And thank God you had facilitators that were able to hold that space. But I think that that's a very important message for our viewers that when they step into these
Mhm.
spaces, that they really do need to be informed of the things that could
Yeah.
potentially happen, like the emotional release and everything that happened
Mhm.
afterwards, right? Which is, so I kind of really want to touch on that too, because what I'm finding now, and I think you would agree, is there's a lot of facilitators out there that are branding these types of buzzwords like the awakening or the shadow work, and they're not
Mhm.
trauma informed. And I think that they potentially can create more harm.
Absolutely.
And one thing that was communicated to me by, a former military, he was a combat soldier that now actually is he does, therapeutic release
Mm.
sessions, and he warned me of this. He says, "Rhonda, you have to be very careful that you just wanna be able to melt the ice, not
Yes.
fracture it, because if you fracture someone, then all of these pieces, like, explode, and then they don't know what to do with themselves after that, and you just said it beautifully, and then that's when you sought more
Mm.
help around
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and it's, like you said, it's like to inform people that this could happen. Not to say that it's like a normal occurrence
Yes.
because I know so many people, that go to breathwork ceremonies and never experienced anything like that. I had significant trauma
Uh-huh.
history. And so it can happen. Like
Yes.
that is what's trauma informed. And I think it's just a buzzword that's floating around.
Yeah.
But yeah, people who have a significant trauma
Mhm.
history, yes, absolutely, those things can happen. And just to be aware of that. And
Uh-huh.
even if you don't have the tools to support them in that, make sure you have the resources and the people who can, and just let them know that that is a
Yeah.
possibility, because the reality is we come to these practices and these work because we're suffering and we want relief so bad. We don't realize that it
Yeah.
can feel a lot worse before we get better, when we start to open it up. And
Yes.
gradual and
Yeah.
tolerable is always the better way to go. You don't have to have a drastic experience like I
Mm.
did. And yes, a lot of people, many
Yeah.
people can have experiences like that. And with psychedelics too, we hear the same. So it can happen.
Yes.
And that's why
Yeah.
it always comes back to like that foundation, build that safety within your system first, start slow, and then
Yeah.
gradually go to these more intense modalities.
So for our viewers then, what type of advice would you give them when they're looking for retreats? They're looking for a facilitator. What type of questions should they be
Yeah,
asking?
definitely do your due diligence and really into
Yeah.
the person who's holding the space and holding the container and their background, like
Yeah.
their training. So, my two ceremonies that
Yeah.
I did with psilocybin were with a clinician who has decades, a very well respected clinician, decades of experience.
Mm. Excellent.
And
Yeah.
that's definitely, or, working with who obviously were in that cultural lineage, but also decades of like definitely look for that. To me, that's imperative. Like those are the most important pieces. How long have they been in this space? What does has their training been in it? Because there are a lot of people holding space who don't have extensive training, especially working with trauma. The person that I actually worked with was a somatic psychologist, and I'll continue to go back to that retreat space because the container felt so, so safe. So, so safe. I never felt so held. That's the most important piece, is the safety of the container, and never feeling pressured to take a lot if it is medicine, not necessarily, maybe it's just breath work, but never feeling pressured to take a lot of medicine or even do the whole breath work journey. Like I always invite people, if they're doing breath work, if it, you know your body better than I do. So I'm not going to push you and say, keep breathing, stay with it if it feels too uncomfortable. Like sometimes we do, of course, need to push ourselves a little bit, but you know your body. If it feels intense, stop. Even if you need to get up because it being in that space with people screaming and yelling feels too intense for you, you can get up and leave, right? Like never getting people to stay with it. Same with like taking psychedelics. If there is a facilitator who's pressuring you to take a certain amount or even take it at all, like it should always just be, optional. And the cool thing was when I went to the 2 retreats in Costa Rica that I just recently went to, we only did 1 day of psilocybin, and all the other days were focused on somatic healing, small group practices. We got a lot of one-on-one attention, so we were really opened up before the ceremony, and some people decided not to take it because they didn't feel like they needed it, which was really nice because there wasn't that pressure around it. Because often people will look when they wanna go to, when they wanna go to, retreats that facilitate plant medicine, they'll look for the place that has the most plant medicine ceremonies. Like, they think they're gonna get, like, "I wanna get the most out of this experience, and I wanna do back to back to back medicine ceremonies," and sometimes that can be worse. Like, the integration is actually where the work and the healing happens. I actually would say that integration, arguably is more important than the experience itself. So working with people who also understand that and have an integration plan. You should never go into these experiences if there isn't a preparation and there isn't an integration plan. And you should definitely have like therapists lined up, practitioners to lined up to support you in that afterwards. That is so, so necessary. I also personally, and I'm not going to say this for everyone, but just from stories that I've also heard, is making sure to give yourself a break. Because if we're just chasing that high and going back to ceremonies, and if you finish a ceremony and you're like, oh, when I need to book my next one, when am I going to do my next one? You're not giving yourself space. Like, you just opened up yourself. Like you said, all these pieces, we open up like all these parts and all these pieces. If we're not giving them space to actually land and process and integrate, nothing is going to stick. None of that work that you just did in ceremony is going to stick if you don't give yourself that space for integration. So I would definitely say that that's important to look at. Like, don't jump on anything, just because your friends went to it. Like, do your own, or you saw online, or an influencer was telling you to go there and do it. Definitely do your due diligence and do your own research into it for sure. What would you say that you look for? Like, what are important pieces for you?
Yeah, so what I would look for would be facilitators that have the lived
Mm.
experience, of course. And also if it's something like ayahuasca, like the grandmother, somebody who's practiced under the traditional lineages, and not somebody who's just attended a 6-week retreat and now comes back to North America and goes, "Oh, I'm going to pour the medicine." Because I have been in ceremony with those types of medicines, and it can absolutely be
Mm.
havoc, chaos. And if you don't have a facilitator that can hold that space with multiple clients, and then also too, the integration part. I can't speak more firmly about that too. If somebody is doesn't provide the integration as part of the package, that would be a bit of a yellow flag. Maybe not a red flag, but definitely a yellow flag.
100%. I actually love that you even mentioned to
Yes.
the embodied and lived experience piece. Make sure the person's embodied in their own
Mhm.
healing work, that they've done their own work because they can hold you as much as they can
Yes.
hold themselves. So it's like if they haven't been
Yeah.
through, their own process of going through experiences like that, how are they going to hold space for it? So that's an important piece of looking for people who are
Yes.
really embodied in that work. And many people ask, what does it mean to be embodied? And this would be my explanation because I think it's a really good way to look at it, and it's helped me, is I always look for people who have that flexibility and that openness in their perspective, meaning that they're
Mhm.
integrated. So they're grounded, like, they're not
Yeah.
dysregulated. The worst thing is to go into, like, a ceremony if the person holding space for it is dysregulated. But if someone is extremely, like, has
Mhm.
strong, very strong opinions or, ideologies, or they're chaotic and dysregulated. But if they're very kind of like fixed in black and white
Yes.
thinking, that's a sign that they're not integrated. Like people who can really hold space for, different perspectives and conversations, like have those
Yeah.
skills, have that safety within their nervous system and that
Yeah.
flexibility within their own nervous system and have built the capacity to hold nuance and complexity, which is actually really rare to find, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and that kinda takes me back to one of your posts too on Instagram that I've been really wanting to touch on too, is, leaving the self-help arena. Because what I heard you say is that I jumped on YouTube and I watched all these videos. And even for myself, I signed up to a very expensive program, self-help program. And what I found was that it was a one shoe
Yeah.
fits all. It was a lot of strategy. And I'm not saying that that doesn't work because some of these are time tested principles that have actually worked for decades. I get that. But I mean, with the self help arena, what was your decision on leaving that for
Yeah,
good?
totally. Um, I think what I'll start with is, and I even just want to mention that it was probably a necessary path, like it all is, right? Everything that leads us to the point where
Of
we are now
course.
was necessary for our own development. For me, because
Mhm.
of my background and because I was so enmeshed in relationships and I had no idea who I was, no sense of self. Like,
Mm,
I completely molded myself into whatever relationship I was in, right? Like, completely just molded to their
yeah.
worldviews. So I do think
Yeah.
for me, during that time, for a brief period, it was necessary for me to come back to myself and come back to my own energy and come back to my own center.
Mhm.
That being said, I stayed in it way too long. And when you stay in it way too long and you're just focused on this, like, hyper individualism, healing just so I can become better and have more and, whatever it is. It was for me, and I'll just speak for myself, it was a little bit narcissistic. I will say that for sure. Like, it was a little
Ah,
self-obsessive.
yeah. Yeah.
Reason being is because I was cut off from
Mhm.
really feeling deep connection to other people. And so, yeah, it became a trap for me of just, like, needing to heal more, but I was never healing because I was always alone. I was always disconnected. I was always isolated.
Mhm.
And I really did reach a breaking point, and it was just such an aha moment of, like, even just getting lost in my own work, like, being obsessed with, like, building my business
Yeah.
and online presence, It was like, "Whoa, I've completely, like, got lost in this." It was almost like it became another addiction, I'm just gonna say it, like, personal development, it
I can
became
relate to
another
that.
addiction, like, I
Yeah.
replaced the substances with this, like, chasing that high of, like, achievement and being more and doing more.
Mhm. Oh, I finished another
Totally.
course.
Totally. Yeah, and never
Yeah.
feeling enough, right? Like, always trying to fill that
Yeah.
void. I never felt like I was enough. And so it was just a huge wake-up call, and I was like, "I need to get out of my own head and stop obsessing over myself and just focus on other people." And yes, of course,
Mhm.
I was helping people in my business, but it's not the same as volunteer work. I do think that we need to just be
Yeah.
giving back without receiving anything. I think it's really important in life. And so I just got back
Yes.
into just community work again, which I was disconnected from for a while, and it helped me get out of my head and
Mhm.
start focusing on, another, rather than, like, just these relationships that are
Mhm.
built on, not to say, like, I don't wanna say extraction, like, all business is extraction, it's not, but there is something to just being of service
Mhm.
with just out of the goodness of your heart and not receiving anything back. And so I got back into
Yes.
that and then really just started focusing on community, and, for me, probably the biggest one of the biggest pieces of my own, healing journey has been attending sweat ceremonies, which I'm now doing I try to go on a
Mm.
weekly basis. I look forward to them so much. I receive
Mhm.
such a sense of belonging, and it's really nice to show up and just to learn and hold respect from another culture and learn from them without taking anything. Going instead of going
Yes.
to these courses and taking courses and, like, "'Kay, what am I gonna get with this so that I can turn this into a business, so I can make money from it?" It's so nice to be able to just show up with respect and humility because showing up like you know nothing because I don't, and showing
Mhm.
up with humility just to, like, learn and honor their ways. And I've learned so much from them, just the being in right relationship with things, being in right relationship with everything in life, like
Yeah.
asking myself, "Am I in right relationship with this?" It's something I often have to pause
Yeah.
and continuously do and ask myself that, "Am I in right relationship with this thing that I want, and why do I want it?" And, is it an act of
Yeah.
really reciprocity? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you said it. That's exactly the word I was just gonna throw into the space. Because we can't just take,
Mhm.
take, take. And going back to the whole part about I need to make money, but one thing that I was really resistant around was these 6, 7 figure coaches that, oh, I can teach you how to be a 6 figure coach. And then you hear the sales pitch And it was exactly the same sales pitch that they used for you to sign up to their course, and I couldn't wrap my head around that. It did not feel
No,
good in the
no.
body.
It's you kind of feel silly, like, when you get, like, pulled in or sucked into these programs that do use that same sales pitch, and then you go into their program and they're
Yeah.
teaching you to use that sales pitch. And you're like, "Oh, I got suckered into this one." Yeah,
Yeah. It made me feel a
totally,
bit silly for
totally.
sure. Yeah, and then with the whole integration piece too, like, I just found myself taking another course, hitting play, "Oh, I finished that, yay, let's go to the next one," hitting play again, watching another course, and never really integrating
Mhm.
it. So with that being said, though, like, that hyper individualism in this capitalist culture, like, how do you think it affects the collective healing?
Yeah, I mean, big time, I think, and I don't wanna say that all like, nothing is all
Mm.
good or all bad. There's definitely, like, conscious
Of
ways
course.
about doing all of these things, right? There's conscious capitalism for sure. I've definitely
Yeah.
met a lot of people who I would consider to be more
Yes.
conscious capitalists. So nothing's all good
Mhm.
or all bad, and we never wanna throw, like, the baby out with the bathwater and think that we need to just burn everything down. I
Yeah,
don't think that's the
exactly.
solution. But yeah, there definitely just needs to
Mhm.
be I mean, people are you just walk out on the streets and no one even says hi. Everyone's so disconnected.
I
It's sad.
know.
And
So
scared of each
disconnected.
other, like, very scared of each other and just super
Yeah.
focused on their own lives, and at the same time, it's like, how can people not be with just the economy and just everything going on and the chaos in the world right now? It's like people are in survival,
Yeah.
and when we're in survival, we can't think beyond ourselves. Right? So it's like it all comes back to
Yeah.
finding that sense of safety within and then going back into community and in connection with the land because the land is always giving.
Yes.
Earth is always giving. And
Yeah.
this has been a really powerful practice for me,
Mhm.
even on the deepest spiritual level, how it's opened up like my own spiritual gifts is reconnecting back to
Mhm.
earth earth reconnection and
Yes.
learning through ancestral ways of being ancestral healing and also learning from a lot of the indigenous cultures like how they're in such right relationship with the land is to
Yeah.
and for some people this might sound hearing it you're like what like this sounds like woo woo it is not it is not at all it
No. It's ancient
absolutely.
technology,
The
truly.
original AI is one of my
Yes.
friends calls it ancestral intelligence, the original AI.
Oh,
Yeah,
I love
but
that.
going and
Yes.
giving a gift to
Yeah, I
nature,
love
like, if
that.
you're gonna go walk through her forest and
Mhm.
take in her beauty and take in her landscapes,
Mhm.
what are you bringing her in exchange? And I
Yeah.
even just started to implement that practice of sometimes I'll go out to nature and I'll build if there's a spot that I visit often that I'm building a relationship with, I'll build an
Mhm.
altar.
Mhm.
I'll say just a prayer, a simple prayer, a hello, connection, like building
Yeah.
that connection. You'll be blown away at what you start to
Yeah.
actually connect with and receive when you start to build these relationships. I sing to the rivers, like, I love to go to the river with my drum
Oh,
and to
I love
sing, and then
that.
she, like, speaks
Yes.
back to you, like, it's yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's not woo-woo. For our viewers, it is not woo-woo. You do receive these very profound messages, and it'll happen in the most unique
Totally, and with
way.
the animal synchronicities that happen, it's powerful.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
have a kind of a funny story actually I wanna share quick. I I was, going medicine picking for one of the sweat lodges I wanted to support and help with the medicine picking, and so we went one afternoon, we were picking juniper, and at the end of the day, I ended up going back in my vehicle because I had a client that I was seeing the next day. I was like, "Oh, I wanna make some juniper tea, so I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna get some juniper."
Mhm.
And without thinking, I didn't, like, give an offering or ask permission to the land before I cut and took juniper, and I started to learn that this is super important,
Oh.
right? Like, you build the relationship, you give, and you ask before taking, and I didn't do that, just, not thinking, just quickly on my way home, grab some left, and I thought this on my way, I'm
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I didn't give an offering, I didn't say a prayer, I didn't ask." But then I was like, "Whatever, I'll do it next time," right? Like, I'll remember next time. So I ended up
Mhm.
making this, like, juniper tea, and I put it in this container that I always use it, and I brought it over to her home, and we were doing, like, a little ritual in her backyard, and the container that I brought it in tipped over, and the entire bottle leaked into the earth, into the ground. There was not one drop. I use this container all the time. It's never happened before. Entire bottle leaked into the ground, and
Right.
I kind of, like, laughed. I'm like, "That was, like, a joke and a sign from, the land spirits, like, you didn't ask permission, so you don't get to take that, and we're giving it back to the earth." Yeah, and things like that start to
Ah.
happen, like, as we build these relationship is we'll get
Mhm.
these and it's almost like a funny communication, right? And just a powerful reminder of, like, "Okay, you're
Yeah.
starting to build a relationship with us. So we're gonna hold you accountable, and you're
Yeah.
gonna commit to that." So, yeah, I thought it was kinda funny.
Yeah, I love that, Alyssa, because that was actually one of my questions, is that how do we actually build a relationship with the land, the medicine, and the elders
Mhm.
and give back? And what I heard was helping them pick
Mm.
the medicine,
Yep.
asking permission, right? And just being present and listening to the messages, like singing to the river and whatnot. So, yeah, I love that. Is there anything else that we can put into our daily practices? Like even just our everyday living in our space that we can kind of give back
Totally.
as well? Like maybe, like recycling or something. Is there anything else that
Totally, and I
comes to
think too,
mind?
it's like it can feel overwhelming, we never know where to start, and I think it blocks people from even wanting to experience things like that, like even going to a sweat lodge because 'cause we're afraid, "What if I don't do it right or if
Mhm.
I'm disrespectful?" Don't worry, they will always guide you.
Yeah.
Just go in with humility. For me, even going through
Mm,
my first sweat
yeah.
experience, I went to, an Indigenous-owned shop, and I just asked them, I'm like, "I'm going to my first sweat. What do I bring? I don't know what I'm doing." And they were so helpful. They're like, "Bring a red cloud,
Yeah.
bring the ceremonial
Aw,
tobacco." So even just simple things like that, and this
nice.
would be very just simple thing is, where are you spending your money? Even when it comes to, like, buying herbs, like, who are you buying them from? The ceremonial tobacco, are you just ordering it on
Ah,
Amazon, or are you actually going to an Indigenous-owned shop? So I would say start
interesting.
there. Like, be in right relationship with where you're
Okay.
even spending your money and who are you supporting. Something super simple.
Right. Yeah, I really, really like that because even when you're looking for retreats, that's one of my must-haves as well. Is does this lineage, does these
Mm.
facilitators give back? Because now we're seeing such huge consumerism in these spaces that now even the indigenous shamans are starting to get into consumerism, and I see there's a lot of falling out now that's happening within these
100%.
communities.
That is such an important piece, and I'm glad that you
Yes.
mentioned that. Yeah, are they even so say if they've,
Mhm.
like if you're working with a facilitator, you're going to retreat where, maybe they moved to a place like, I don't know, Costa Rica or Peru, are they actually giving back to the
Mhm.
community by being is really
Yes.
important, like, whether it
Yeah.
is a community garden or whatever it is, like, how are they giving back? If are they just moving there to extract, pop start building all these
Mhm.
Airbnbs and a retreat center, whatever that is, right? So,
Yeah, money can
yeah,
be funny
totally.
sometimes, right? Yeah, and, like, when I'm planning a trip to Peru here in the next maybe, like, year or 2, and, one of the retreats that I've looked at, they actually have a 3-month residency
Mm,
program so that you can go and
nice.
plant.
Nice.
Like, they have a farm. Yes, and I think that that's very important, right? Especially when the Westerners are, it's becoming very
Totally.
mainstream
That was
now.
the same with me, the one that I went to in Costa Rica. They had a farm there, farmland as
Yeah.
well. So, yeah, super
Ah.
cool.
Yeah, so speaking of the indigenous
Mhm.
elders, Alyssa, are there any ancestors, biological or even spiritual, that you feel most
Yes, I love
connected
this
to?
conversation because it's been so pivotal for my healing is starting to dive into ancestral healing work,
Mm,
and I just wanna give some recommendations for if
yes.
this is an area for anyone who wants to explore. There's a really good book called Ancestral Medicine. So if you don't even know where to begin,
Ooh, I'll
yeah,
write
and
that
he
down.
has, an online, platform where you can take really incredible courses. His name is Daniel Four. I believe it's
Mhm.
ancestralmedicine.org, but that was where I started to actually, really learn about this and where to even begin, and he always suggests to begin with one lineage that you feel the most connected to or that feels the most well in spirit. So for me, that was definitely my
Okay.
mom's because I didn't really know my dad's side of the family that well, but also because my great grandma was actually born on the boat from Ukraine. So that I felt still
Oh,
connected enough
okay.
to the culture, whereas like I don't even know when my other ancestors came here. I have no idea. but they were still very much connected to their own
Yeah.
culture. So what that looks like is just even starting to connect to your own ancestral ways of being is, and it doesn't even necessarily mean that connecting to, all their cultural practices, though it can be. But,
Yeah.
things that are really universal is even just having simple rituals of building an altar for your ancestors, then connecting to that lineage. So when I started, because I knew my grandma was actually coming to me in dreams and she came to me in ceremony. So I'm like, okay, I need to focus a lot more on ancestral healing. And yeah, I was getting a lot of very intense synchronicities and signs. So I just started to build an altar and I'll do just some prayers and, even just give 30 minutes of connecting to my grandma, connecting to my ancestors on that side, and just giving a gift. So they say it can be like an offering of, say, flowers or like food without asking anything in return. And I learned this a lot too from even going to the
Yeah.
sweats because we don't actually say a prayer and ask for anything for ourselves until the last door. Like the first three doors are like praying for others, your ancestors. And the last door is asking for yourself. So just simple ritual practices like that. An altar
Mhm.
can be very basic and simple. If it's cool if you have some items from your ancestors or know more about them, or just have some certain items from your culture. But you don't have to. It can be a candle. It could be a glass of water. It can be just like this bread that we put down in the offering, and just say a prayer and drop in and start inviting in that relationship. Danielle 4 always says to start there as honor and through ritual, and then later on to get into ancestral repair work, because ancestral repair work can be very intense and it can bring up a lot. So not everyone's fully ready to dive into that. So always just, starting with the honoring practices is a good place to start. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Because like our generational trauma is a thing too, right? So we do need to revisit
Yeah.
some of that and understand like where did our parents come from and how did they even get here and all of those things. Because my grandparents were Ukraine
Mm,
as well,
yeah.
Ukrainian. And what I learned in actually an ayahuasca ceremony was that my grandfather was in one of the very first world wars when he was like 14 years old. And right when I had that visual, that image, it just immediately healed the masculine wound that I had around my father because I realized what he had been raised around. And it did so much, and I think that it's important to connect to our ancestors
Oh,
in
very
that
much
way.
so. There's another
Right?
good book if
Yeah.
anyone's interested in, like if anyone's a nerd like me and loves neuroscience, it didn't start with you.
I do.
It
Oh,
didn't start
yes.
with you, Inherited Family
Yep.
Trauma, How It Shapes Who We Are and How to Break the Cycle. One of the best
Mm.
books if you're wanting to start to dive into, intergenerational healing for sure, by Mark Wallen. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'm gonna have to grab
Yeah.
these titles, and I'll put them in the
Awesome,
descriptions too.
awesome.
Yeah, because I think that's really important. And then as far as, like, the indigenous lineages, are you more drawn to, like, the indigenous, like, the North American the indigenous from North America or more like the
Mhm.
Shipibo in
Yeah,
Peru?
I would say North
Both?
America. I've never been to Peru. So North America for sure, just
Okay.
because, and I always have been, very interesting enough. Most of my friends growing up, actually, my best friends were Indigenous, so I've always been drawn to the culture.
Ah,
And
yeah.
because we are on their land, so I definitely want to learn from them because
Mhm.
we are on their land. I'm connecting with their ancestral spirits and land spirits. So that would be where I,
Yes.
I feel really drawn to now. But I think that really depends on like where I'm traveling or where I'm living, right? Then I would obviously,
Yeah.
if I were ever to go to Peru, then I would definitely be wanting to just learn and respect and honor their ways of being for sure. But they also too just learning
Mhm.
from them and attending, their ceremonies, it really inspired me to connect to my own lineage and my own ways of being, and I think it's so important
Yeah.
for us. I think it's a really good starting point to learn how their ways of living and their ways of being, which are actually a lot of them will be in alignment possibly with your cultures as well, because there are a lot of different I would say universal threads, like just earth honoring practices. We're all indigenous to somewhere. All of
Yes.
our ancestors, they were more connected to the land than we are right now. So that's always a
Very
good
much
place to
so.
start.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, even look at our ancestors like the
Totally.
homesteaders.
Totally.
and now we worry about whether or not we have a clear Wi-Fi signal and they were like living off the land. And I actually would kind of like to see us
Oh,
go back there
oh
a little
yeah.
bit, because I think we're in such a time period of such
Hmm.
consumerism that being disconnected from the land, I believe, is the mind virus. Like, we are so disconnected to our water sources, the earth, where our garbage goes, where our sewage goes. Like, none of us even really know anything about it. We're the only species that are literally ruining our planet, like our backyard, like our
Yeah.
living
Yeah,
space.
absolutely. And it's wild how many people don't even
Yeah.
think that this is an important area to look at. Like, I don't get it. It's wild to me.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure, and I do believe, like, this whole materialism and consumerism is a big part of why we're getting mentally unwell.
100%. I have a
Yes.
friend who she lived most of her life, not most of her life actually, up till grade 7, because I think she's now in her
Mhm.
40s. So up to grade 7, she lived in South Africa, and, her
Mm.
parents lived there, they were missionaries, and she just said about, like, how they were so much happier even though they were living in so much poverty. They just seemed happier, and then she moved to Canada, and she was just
Mm.
shocked
Yeah.
at how, like, unhappy people were. And she's like, "You have everything." Like,
Yes.
yeah,
It's so true. It's so true. Now, one thing too that I wanted to kind of ask you too, because I did hear you mention like I was in this self-help arena, the hyper individualism, what was the catalyst for you, that profound moment where you got to experience like healing in community? And then even now as a facilitator, what are your experiences with that now, even with the men's
yeah,
circles?
so my first experience of healing in community, so I would say that the first experience was actually going to that breath work, which was here in Winnipeg. I mean, that
Okay,
being said,
yeah.
I went to 12-step meetings, but I never felt a deep connection or healing, going to those programs,
Mhm.
still all for them for sure, but not to the extent that I experienced starting to go to the breathwork sessions. I went to another one in Austin, Texas, where I actually did the training. I do work for that company. And again, just being with a group
Mhm.
of people where, you were able to just be vulnerable and share from your heart. It was
Yes.
huge. So that opened up the community healing piece. And now and it happens gradually over time. So, I used to not really have any friends, and I never really had a place where I belonged. I didn't know if I'd
Mhm.
ever come across that. The more work that you do and the more you commit to even just looking and trying different things out and putting yourself in these spaces, even though it might feel uncomfortable, the more you'll start to draw those people in. And I have such a solid group of community of
Yeah.
women here actually that we meet for full moon and new moon
Mhm.
ceremonies. Every single month, we do this together in person. And that has been so healing
Yeah.
for the feminine energy within me. Um, because I felt,
Ah,
what's interesting
yes.
is I always had a lot more guy friends, platonic guy friends, but the feminine, I had wounding around the
Mhm.
feminine, and I've really worked on healing that. I wouldn't say that I have a
Mhm.
whole lot of just men's circles, though I have held space for an all men's group, breathwork ceremony actually because I'm a practitioner, and that was powerful for me.
Mhm.
It was really powerful and healing for
Mm.
me, reason being, and I didn't do this too soon, it was later on in my healing journey, coming from experiencing, domestic violence and then putting myself in a container with men
Mhm.
who were, like, yelling and letting out anger and holding space for it. A lot of big men. But it was actually super
Yeah.
healing for
Yeah.
me and to realize that I can hold space for this. Like, anger is not bad, it's a healthy emotion. It's the behaviors attached to it that can be destructive, but not the emotion itself.
Yeah, that's interesting because when I decided to do the
Mm,
men's work, I was just like, honestly, I was divinely guided into this work. Long story, not the right time and place right now because this is your story, but, I was just divinely guided to this, and my therapist asked me, he's like, "Rhonda, are you in a bit of a recapitulation right now where you're trying to recreate the same scenarios and change the outcome?" And I was like, "Hmm, maybe," right? So I'm out there trying to heal the masculine so that I can heal the feminine parts in me that didn't feel safe in the masculine. And for whatever reason, it seems to be working because now I do realize that there is a lot of incredible men out there that are stepping into these community circles, are showing vulnerability, and it's so beautiful to
Totally, and
watch.
we do that, like,
Yeah.
as healers, as practitioners, like, we are actually looking to and it's subconscious, and there's nothing wrong with this, but we're also wanting to heal those parts
Yes.
of ourselves, and for me, I have
Of
done more
course.
healing when I actually started holding space for others than I have just focusing on my own healing work. It's been pivotal, it's been huge because it
Yes.
brings up all your stuff, brings up so much when you start to actually step
Yeah.
into that arena of supporting other people on their journeys.
Yeah, I've had some very profound moments even in my one-on-one counseling sessions with some of the men that I work with, to the point where I actually shed some tears. And as a counselor, I'm not supposed to, have a meltdown in a session. But it was actually quite beautiful because they held space for me too. And yeah, it was just this kind of like this very sacred transactional exchange between two people that were showing vulnerability in our experience. And it's just been a
I
wonderful
love that you
journey,
shared that.
wonderful
I think it's
journey.
important to mention how you even
Yeah.
shared that you allowed yourself to break down in front of them. So many practitioners don't allow themselves
Yes.
to do that because they think that they need to show up
Yeah.
a certain way, professional, and have it all together and that they're fully healed. But the opposite, not to say the opposite, that obviously,
Yeah.
of course, you're showing up professionally, but to be able to actually show vulnerability and lead the way to really open the door for them is so
Yes.
huge. I went to a retreat and I brought a woman who is, I don't like the word client, but was a woman that I was working with. I know that we
Mhm.
use the word clients just because we just use that. But it was a woman that I was supporting on her healing
Mhm.
journey. And she came with me and she saw me like break down. Like I allowed myself to really go there.
Mhm.
And she said to me after, she's like, "I have like so much just respect and admiration for you even more than I did." And she goes, "I didn't even believe in this work
Oh,
until I
wow.
actually saw you like fully believe into it in it until I actually saw you go through that. Now I believe in it even
Yeah.
more." So yeah, we're meant to lead the
Yeah.
way. Like we're meant to be embodied in our work. We're never fully healed. It's a constant
Yeah.
journey. Sometimes I reopen things that I'm like, "What? I already worked through that." It's like, "Nah, you gotta go through another layer of it, with a different level
Yeah.
of consciousness and awareness this time."
And we also share a bit of the same journey too with the celibacy. And what a transformation that has created
Yeah.
within my body as well, because I just find that now, well, as we all know, the music industry, the movies, everything is just so highly sexualized that people are not creating authentic bonds with each other, and really seeing one another. It's all really kind of based on physical appearance, that physiological chemical cocktail that goes off in our brains. And then we get addicted to the way people make us feel. And then all of a sudden, 3 to 6 months later, it's like, I don't even know this person.
Totally.
Yeah. So, what would you say to that, Alyssa? Like when people are over sexualized in their relationships about celibacy?
Yeah, and yeah, I chose a path of celibacy for it was 6 years, and I do wanna say
Hmm.
that it's not me preaching to say that that's a path for everyone, but it was a necessary path for me because of my past sexual experience,
Me
and
too.
so,
Yeah.
for other people, that's not their path, and I totally understand that and respect that, it's not for everyone. For me, it was a necessary step for me to take
Mhm.
because I had been, again, so codependent and enmeshed in these relationships. I was a
Yeah.
doormat. I let men treat me like garbage, and I thought all
Mm,
my worth was in my sexuality in
yeah.
these relationships. I didn't value myself. I had no self-esteem, and so for me, it was like, "Enough, Alyssa. Like, you don't need that external validation
Mhm.
from men. You're gonna start to build healthy platonic friendships with men, where you're not sexualized, because I actually do have a lot of friends, male friends, where I've never felt once sexualized or that they were wanting something more from me. So many people are like, "Oh, that's not possible."
Right.
Like someone's always I hear this all the time. There's one person always
I hear it too.
attracted. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, obviously they haven't experienced it yet. When you pull back your sexual energy, like that's what you need to do. Don't be leaking
Mhm.
sexual energy. When you're not leaking it and you pull it back and you maybe put it into some creative project or something that you're passionate about, then you're going to draw in people who just like respect you and respect those, they can feel that energetic boundary, right? Because sometimes it's like we're scared of like whether someone is sexualizing us or we're leaking that energy. But it's just like when you're solid in your own being, that was what really that path helped me do. And also just to clear out any energetic entanglements that I had in my past relationships with men. You know, it's for women, we
Yes.
release oxytocin when we sleep with
Mhm.
someone. And I get
Yeah.
attached if I sleep with someone. So I don't want to be sleeping with someone too
Mhm.
soon when I start seeing them. Like I want to make sure that it's actually aligned because I know that completely clouds my judgment. If I sleep with someone too soon, I'm attached. Like there's no way I'm not going to be. Maybe some people
Mm.
can
The oxytocin is
totally. And
released.
some people can detach and I
Yeah.
respect that. For me, I couldn't. And yeah, so that way I actually get to know a person before, getting too invested. And so I have dated men over that
Uh-huh.
period. Like I definitely went on dates. I definitely saw a few men. Went
Yeah.
through periods where I didn't date at all, like a 3-year period of no dating. But yeah, it was a nice practice of not feeling sexualized. And I attract such a different group of men. Like the men that and of course, like
Yeah. Yeah.
you're still going to attract, people with like wounds and whatnot. None of us are perfect, absolutely. But like the caliber of men that I attract now, it's like a completely different level than the past.
It's
Yeah.
so true. Yeah. Long time ago, I took Katie Grimes's love dating
Mm.
relationship course. And part of that was the 90-day dating plan. So I bring that into my sessions with the men that I work with all the time. And they even said, like, that's absurd. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me how that's going to work out for you when you start to sleep with somebody right out of the gate. Because again, it's this nervous system dysregulation. Chaos in the body
Yeah,
feels like home. And they generally attract relationships that are very toxic, as we
totally.
know,
Totally.
right? And some of the men have even said to me, well, yeah, but the crazy ones are more fun. I'm like, oh my God. Right? But then their intentions are not in the
Totally.
right place. But however, what keeps bringing them back to the judicial system is not just drugs and
Mm,
alcohol, but
yeah,
chaotic relationships where 911 is called all the
totally. I
time.
don't know a single person, just speaking in like the recovery space that I've met and that I've worked with who hasn't also struggled in relationship. I haven't
Mhm.
met them yet.
Yes.
So it just kind of goes hand in hand. It's that
Uh-huh.
struggle with connection, right? Like we often say that
Right.
addiction is the absence of connection. Like sobriety, the opposite of addiction is connection, not
Mhm.
sobriety. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people, you might be surrounded by people and always in a relationship, but doesn't mean that you're deeply connected and
Uh-huh.
have like an intimate relationship with yourself. So many of us, we
Yeah,
struggled. For
exactly.
me, it was just as much about healing my relationship patterns as it was healing my
Mhm.
substance abuse patterns.
Yeah, that's so true. So, like, for our viewers, what would you say to the men and women out there that are always in these frequent sexual relationships, but that are feeling very emotionally disconnected and unfulfilled? Like, what would you say? What would be your message? And celibacy as not as a
Mhm.
restriction, but as a way to a path of deeper
Yeah,
knowing.
and, it's something that you have to come to on your own, and sometimes we don't actually get to that place
Mm,
until we've really had enough. Because, like, we know it's like it can be like
yeah.
it's a love addiction or a sex addiction or whatever it can be, not
Yes.
necessarily maybe to the extent with our substances or just a validation addiction,
Hmm.
right? Like, even for me, pulling back that energy of getting attention from men, like, it was even important for me to date because I didn't receive
Ah,
any validation or attention for 3 years from a man, and I'm not saying that that's a path for
wow.
everyone, I honestly
Yes.
don't wanna do that again. But that being
Yeah.
said, yeah, it
Uh-huh.
it gave me, an opportunity to find that self-worth within, but it only came because I got to a place where I was like, enough. Like, I don't want to keep putting myself through these painful patterns and keep dating the same person over and over again, just with like a different face, like the same scenario and keep reacting it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just have to come to that place on your own. No one can force you there, but there's
Yeah.
definitely ways to work through it when you're ready. You know, definitely focus on healing your
Yeah.
attachment wounds, your relationship patterns. There's a lot of resources and programs and therapists that focus on that, and there's tools that can support you too.
Yeah.
Even learning the communication tools, right? So many of us don't even know how to communicate
Yeah.
with others, and even just building your friendships back up. You
Yeah.
know, I often lost myself in relationships and would get rid of all my friends. So my main focus is making sure that I have a
Mhm.
solid friend group so that I don't do that again. And I never, when I do get in a relationship, I'm not going to distance myself from anyone again. Like, I'm going to stay connected to myself and stay connected to my community.
Yeah, and what would you say too to the people that might fall into these social pressures? You know, like the external pressures like dating apps and social circles, social media. I just find that a lot of women, well, both men and women are so highly
Hmm.
sexualized. But yet they're getting all of the likes and the followers, and sometimes I even get, like, a bit, I get my nose out of joint a little bit. I'm like, "Dang, like, my content is trying to do a good thing here, but I don't have the engagement like so and so does, but they're overly sexualized." And then you have all these, like, the
Hmm.
OnlyFans, and stuff like that, and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, like, we're heading for a disaster if this continues to go in the rate that it
Totally. Well,
does."
it's that external validation. And unfortunately for women, often
Mhm.
it's through sexualizing that we get that external validation. For men, it looks different. For men, often it's like about like their
Yeah.
money or their what they do in the world, right? It's the same thing for us. It's like our body and our
Mm.
appearance. For
Yeah.
me, it's like I really invite people, if it's something that really bothers you, clean your social media out. And if you're like, you know what, I'm so sick of just
Mm.
only seeing these types of people getting, you know, the intention or the views, clean your social media up. Start really following people who you look up to in the space who do not sexualize themselves at all. Like, find those people, and you'll be
Yes.
surprised when you stop again leaking that energy, the people that you attract. I have so many people now in my life who I never
Mm.
hear sexualize women. Like, so many men, never. They don't look at women that way. It would never come out of their mouths. Like, 'cause
I love
that's
it.
who I'm calling in.
Yeah.
It's like our energy calls in these people. Like, what we're putting out, we're gonna get back.
Mhm.
So it's like, who are you giving your attention to? Where are you leaking your energy? I always call it closing up energy leaks.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Yes. And you know what? That is such good advice. Thank you for that. Because I think that's a very important message for our viewers is that we need to actually start creating these
Mhm.
energetic boundaries. You know, what you think about, you
Mhm.
bring about. If you keep observing this content, you're gonna see more
Totally.
of
Totally. The
it.
algorithm the algorithm pushes
Yeah.
out what we look for, right? They know what we're viewing, so
It's so
they'll fill our
true.
feeds.
And like there's a bit of cancel culture maybe but I'm like, no, it's okay to put people on mute. It's okay to unfollow. It's not because of it's a hateful black and white
Totally.
decision. It's like you have to protect your energy. You
Totally.
really do.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being said, like with our work together, the masculine and the feminine, where do we need more feminine? Where do we need more flow? And where do we need more focus, like the masculine? How can we work together? Because I feel like there's such a polarity
Yeah.
right now between men and women. And how do we heal these wounds? And how do we bring us
It's
back
such a
together?
dance, and it all starts within. Like, it's balancing the masculine and feminine within ourselves. I don't really
Yeah.
I don't really, like, buy into or follow, like, this extreme polarity where, like, the masculine is this way and the feminine needs to be this way. I used to. And I very much was, like,
Mm.
into that
Yeah.
belief system of, like, I want, like, a masculine man just so I can be in my feminine. It was actually just my codependent patterns coming back up. So
I love that you're bringing
yeah,
this
so
up.
I've really
Yes.
worked on healing that. I'm continuing to heal it within me and actually cultivating a
Mhm.
relationship with my own inner masculine. What I was looking for was actually that relationship with
Mm.
my masculine and within me. And we really should,
Yeah.
there's never going to be a perfect balance of us being equally masculine and feminine,
Mhm.
but just having a healthy relationship with those energies within. And, what is your relationship to focus, to taking aligned action? For many women, who don't have a healthy relationship with their inner masculine, they struggle to take action. Maybe they're focusing on like manifestation and visualization, but they're not actually taking aligned action. Like that's where it
Yeah.
might show up. And maybe you're
Hmm.
taking too much aligned action. Maybe you're way too much in your masculine and you're not actually like dropping in, um, cultivating a relationship with your intuition, allowing yourself space to take breaks, go about in nature, like
Yes.
be more in that flow. So it's really individual, but it really comes back to those energetics within.
I love that you spoke about the masculine, feminine energies within and not just as
Yeah.
gender roles, because it's so true. I'm very much in my masculine and I know that. And I'm just starting to tap into my more feminine. And you do have to balance those energies. You really do.
It's such a dance. It's such a
Yeah.
dance for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it is very intense because I was always, because what I learned about that is I'm in my masculine because I was a wounded
Mm,
feminine, and the masculine had to step into
yeah.
the picture to protect wounded feminine, and once I started to understand that more, I realized that we do need to have this dance together. It's so
Absolutely,
important.
absolutely, and what we deny in ourselves, we
Yeah.
start to project outwards. So it's like if you're denying your own inner feminine, feminine women are gonna trigger the F out of you. Like, you are not gonna wanna them in your space.
Yes.
And the same thing, it's like
Yeah,
if you do not have a
yeah.
relationship with your inner masculine, then you're gonna start pointing the finger and calling other women too masculine. So it's like whatever we're suppressing and denying within
Mm,
ourselves that does exist and wants to express itself, we're gonna start to
mm.
project outwards.
That is incredible, Alyssa. Thank you so much. You do have a lot of innate wisdom. You exude it. It's such a blessing to sit in this
Thank you.
space
Well,
with
I feel
you.
the same way about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
definitely on very, very
Oh,
similar
thank
paths,
you.
and you're doing really, really great work in the world. It's really great to see. And I love that you hold space for the masculine. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, how are we doing for time? We should probably start wrapping
Sure.
up a
Yeah,
little bit?
my
Yeah, that's okay. Well, okay, Alyssa, before I let you go, please let the viewers know, how do we find you? How can they work with you?
absolutely. So the best place to find me is on Instagram, so at Wild Feminine Rise, and I'll also give you my website so you can find everything in the show notes as well. But I would definitely say that Instagram is the place that I show up the most.
Perfect. Awesome, Melissa. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, and I'll be looking forward to maybe doing a part
Absolutely,
two.
anytime.